Thank you very much, Chima Saab and all excellencies here, specifically for inviting me here. But most particularly, I want to thank His Excellency Hamad Al-Zawi and the Ambassador of the UAE and all our other friends from various countries, our donors, our participants, and of course our crucial development partners in the quest to move the needle on both environmental goals and climate change. Now, as you know, that is very difficult in times where international and multilateral decisions are bound by consensus. Yet, we all saw that COP27 gave us one reason for hope and one reason for disappointment. We all know about the loss and damage fund, and we really appreciate all our partners and countries' urgent cooperation in that and path-breaking plans to take this forward. But obviously, we did remain unable to thrash out in the mitigation groups the targets, better targets for especially the high emitters to 1.5. So I think while those issues will carry on and we will pay attention to them, today's subject is of course the IUCN's donor meetings, and I think it's a valuable opportunity. I wish I could have stayed on and talked with you for at least a couple of hours, because this is where a great deal of plans, strategies and policies can be fleshed out on the ground. We have a tendency across government of Pakistan and also with our donor communities to bring projects to the plate, to the surface. We pass them, and what happens is that very often they remain projects. It is crucially important, my friends, here, because you are critical to the decision making and the executive process that takes change forward. Now, if change is the goal, which I believe it is for all of us, in terms of building capacity for Pakistan to be more resilient, to be more integrated and inclusive in policy making as well as its execution, then we have to absolutely be mindful of what is actually making a difference on the ground. We often make policies that sparkle on paper. They light up a seminar with great enthusiasm, and then afterwards they become just that. They become paper policies. This is something I've seen all over the world, especially about SDGs, especially about climate change. The world is 300, well away from coming to achieving any SDGs, and yet, climate goals, ambitions, plans, strategies are crucial for building the kind of world that we need to rebuild, because rebuilding is necessary, and we are standing in a crucial inflection point of the Earth's need for action from the race that occupies this planet, which is all of us. And we need to now really be clear into what actually makes a difference on the ground. Now, before we get into a way forward, because it's important to recommend that, it is also crucial to see that, let's face it, conferencing does give us a way forward, but very often that way forward is something that national governments have to pursue for their own interests as well as the development and well-being of their people. Now, where Pakistan stands today, it is at a very, very difficult, literally climate precipice that we face. Now, why? Because as you all saw, we had a catastrophic flooding which exposed deep vulnerabilities in the whole of our community and social and national response. We did what we could, but deep vulnerabilities compared to what actually happened. 33 million impacted is too large a number. It is the size of 3 small medium-sized European countries. Now, to be able to inclusively address that and have people back on their feet with sustainable livelihoods that are also resilient for a future that they need to build, either with its farming or tending to cattle or fishing or even manufacturing. These are people at the bottom of the social pyramid, and I particularly am thankful for the IUCN for working with us on the Gender Action Plan, Climate Gender Action Plan. There isn't one, and let me assure you why that's important personally to me and to all of us is, of course, that everybody has a politically correct commitment to gender mainstreaming. It has to go beyond that. And what we did was then we took that gender action plan and revised many of our other plans quietly to include gender mainstreaming. That's a first. That is something that my ministry had to do as a commitment to inclusion, and also because the power of women's work, the transformative quality of agency they can provide in changing many of the norms on the ground is very important. So while we talk about inclusion and going forward, remember that women are also not only are they agents of nature-based transformations because they work very closely with nature. Women are by nature positive. Okay, and in this week of the conference on biodiversity coming together, it is important to note that our species extinction is of great worry. Our ecosystem degradation is of great worry. And who can change that? Women work most, at least in developing countries, with nature, with agriculture, with water, and of course with our species. Men tend to hunt them down. Okay, so let's be very clear. Who husbands, wrongly gendered, but who husbands nature? It is the women of Pakistan. They both work in the fields, they both carry the water, they also are the nurturers of the household and half of Pakistan's undocumented economy, both in the homes and outside. They're the caregivers of nature and families and communities. So if we just target women and their actions, we come up with a double benefit. Today, I just read in rushing out, I've read an article on McKinsey's report. McKinsey is a big organization, as you all know, that works on a fair amount of cutting edge research. And McKinsey says that for Pakistan, our remittances and other things amount to $30 billion. And right now, $30 billion is the magic number. It is the number needed to fund the recovery of the catastrophic flood that impacted 33 million people. In that 33 million people, 70% of those affected were women and children. To this day, at that point, it was 2 months before, it was 6,500 women pregnant, exposed, vulnerable, without access to health facilities that had drowned, giving birth or getting maternal and medical care in very fragile and frankly unacceptable conditions. Today, 400,000 women are still in that position. 20 million people are still in need of they are living off humanitarian assistance and are in need of resettlement, of livelihoods, before we can talk of climate resilience. When a country has people living on the shores of vulnerability, on the shores of new lakes created by climate events that the world has never seen, that the century has never seen, and I'm quoting the Secretary General of the United Nations, not me. I will obviously project some extent of bias. The entire UN system came here and said, we have never seen anything like this in our whole experience. So please note that while we talk about building forward, we still have to rebuild. and we still have to recover with the kind of resilience we are being told to. And the IUCN is one of our best partners in responding with agility and with what I call climate empathy. That is a level of compassion with the earth, with victims, with those who suffer, and those who can actually rebuild. So that climate compassion is needed. It needs to be rebooted. It needs to be linked to humanitarian agendas, but also forward-looking, sustainable climate agendas, which means that there has to be an investment on the ground in conserving water, land use, in people who are at the core of all our, should be at the core of all our actions. And when we say this, because all three things are linked to nature. We extract constantly from nature, and it is time for us to give back. The only way we can give back is by incentivizing that giving back. People don't, just because I have announced it or you have announced it as a grand policy norm, do that. They have to find water, drinking water, they have to find food, and they have to get predictable futures for their families, for healthcare, for access to educations which are still fragile for them, and they have to return to some kind of normalcy which was still under average at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of social indices, in terms of gender and other gaps and human indices, but they are still not there. So let's be very clear, because there are so many development partners in the room. Let's not speak in a vacuum. 20 million people in Pakistan, because 1/3 of Pakistan was inundated in the south, unlike lucky Islamabad, are not in an arc of privilege in this great flood that inundated 1/3 of the country. They are not living in this arc of privilege that we are all in today. They have no resources to even recover. The country is still worried about where it will even rebuild 8,000 plus kilometers of roads, several hundred bridges, and repair even the basic farm to community to market nexuses that allow transport and that allows people to start selling and trading their wares. I mean, agri-commerce is essential to their livelihoods. And the vulnerability is so extreme, ladies and gentlemen. I won't speak to you in abstractions. There are enough people to do that, and there is enough excellent, important policy-making jargon in the room. I need to move away from that to tell you how bad the situation is on the ground. The vulnerable who work most closely with nature are not in a position to stop exploiting it until they have sustainable livelihoods. So let's not talk Pollyanna sustainable economics. First, we have to get those people on their feet. A future. When we gave mosquito nets at the height of the dengue and other chronic waterborne disease epidemics, because that's what was caused, that was with it. You have so much standing water not draining because it's under sea level. What did people do? Mosquito nets, we were calling all donors, all friends, NDMA fighting with PDMA, everybody fight, because there just wasn't enough tents or mosquito nets, let alone food and water. And the first month was awful. I don't think anyone slept in federal government or Sindh or Balochistan, or shouldn't have. Anyway, when we gave them mosquito nets on the ground, just visiting, what did families do? It was quite tragic. The scale of the human tragedy was this to me. The householders started putting the mosquito nets on the one buffalo they had left, because that was guaranteed, not on their family or children. That was their guarantee of some predictable income for even the next few months or the next 6 months. That is what people's choices are when they are faced with extreme fragility, and when they start seeing their day-to-day vulnerability. They don't even know that it's called vulnerability. They don't have enough literacy or strategic goals to talk about. They just know that they are in a hard scrabble fight with the elements, the sky, the water, and their inability to provide a sustainable income. And that's the most important thing. That's where all our funds went, where our donor funds, anyway, all funds are grants now, which is trapping Pakistan in a terrible sea of flood and debts. That never used to be the case, and IUCN yours is not the case. So we welcome your assistance always. Much of it is technical, that is sorely needed. I see a huge dearth of technical capacity in the country for climate science, for building resilient pathways, for actual work needed on the ground. We can even make the policies, we can even make I'm also rushing because I have to go to my ministry and finish the 4 hours recovery plan. It has to be climate proof to some extent. It's late, but we have to do it. There is no money for it. Even my climate resilience funds, $160 million, were immediately repurposed. That was a loan too from the World Bank. It was immediately repurposed for frontline humanitarian needs. We've got to feed people on the ground, get them the shelter. And that went straight to the Benazir Income Support Program, which is a policy that empowers women by giving them identity card, ensuring that they have an identity card, and ensuring that they have access to money. This is the kind of policy we need. Or look at the Sindh Rural Support Program. It's a small scale endeavor funded by the EU and some other donors. It has done very well in activating women, farmers and householders on the ground. It provides them an income, it ensures an identity, and they become engaged in productive agri and other commerce on the ground. They become enablers not just of nature conservation, but also they become enablers of power at the most vulnerable bottom of our pyramid. At the bottom of the poorest pyramid are women, of course, because they don't even have decision-making power in their household. So when they get a check, it's in their name. Everybody has to negotiate with them, even if it's 2,000 rupees. That's a game changer for that household. So it's in her name and it has to be negotiated, and the same. So I'm saying, very, very briefly, I want to say what to do. Well, sit with us and identify these are the good programs. Don't spread yourself thin because you have to do this, and this to tick the boxes. Please stop doing that. Please stop wasting your resources and time on 50 things because they're the right boxes to tick. Pick 2-3 big things that we identify together. The IUCN can do it for you, all of us, and scale them up. That is how you make a difference. Please focus on, and if you invest in women on the ground, you're naturally scaling up all that you have identified as priority sectors, the CCGR, agriculture and food security right away. That box gets ticked. Disaster risk reduction gets immediately ticked because they know they are the ones who run with their family and their food. Water, sanitation and hygiene, it's women who work the water and the sanitation and the hygiene. I won't get into what others do. Integrated coastal management. Again, that's a joint activity, but in Pakistan on the fisheries, whether you know it or not, it's the women doing the work with the babies under their arm. If you go into the fisheries, you'll see who's shelling the shrimp. It's the women. Go into the actual ground and you'll see. So, energy, now that's something that is very important, and to say to women that you need to work your stove, cook your food. Women are cooking the food. So at that level, how are they using energy? Where are they getting it from? It will reduce forest cutting and forest degradation if we do that. These are practical steps. If those women are empowered with natural fuels or renewables, solar power for their children to read, in the night when there's no electricity. And many organizations are doing it at a small scale. They're distributing solar lamps. They're finding ways to give them stoves that are eco-friendly, and also access to power. They need that. They need energy to cook their food, to light up their homes, to heat their water. So please, let's be real. So energy gets ticked if we focus on women. Transport also. Now women are only driving the big buses in Thar, where we have projects, but they are also able and in need of transportation. How many girls drop out of secondary school in Pakistan, Sindh, Punjab, everywhere? And why? A huge proportion drops out. Why? Because they do not have transportation to the schools that are near enough. And if a family makes a decision on a cascade of choices with limited resources, they send the boys to school, they give the boys the best food also. So I know transport isn't meant like that, it's meant to be energy and green transport. Of course it is. But I'm looking at it from another point of view, from the bottom up, from the user's view. And these 6 goals all intersect with women's lives, how they use energy, how they use transport, water, reduce disaster, how they tend agriculture and secure food for their families. So these are frankly the actions and indexes to invest in. And happy to work with you even in a couple of provinces, because that's where the action is taken. They're all eager to work. No province will walk away from this. They are all eager to work. But they need resources, they need guidance, they need technical capacity. Climate action is new for many Pakistanis. There's been decades of denialism of how exposed we are and how an investment in our future is needed now. So when you have tomorrow to worry about, you don't invest in 3 months later, or what COP27 told you, or what your climate minister committed for, NDCs. Simple as that. So change on climate has to not just come from us, it has to come from us. We must technically improve our action plans to give people and provinces the capacity to pick it up. They don't have the capacity, so let's create it for them, right? That's our job. And they don't, it's not mandatory, but my experience is that the provinces are looking for capacity. If they see a federal government that is agnostic of partisan politics when making resource distribution choices, which is English for saying, I won't withhold money if you're from the opposition, then they respond. And they have seen us doing that. They are on a task force Zoom with me, completely non-mandatory for them to cooperate. They all come at the highest level. I don't advertise it, it's done quietly in the ministry. Everybody's there spending hours on smog, on forest fires, how to reduce them, and on how to build structures for saving people's lives in heat waves. And my job is not just to save Islamabad, it is to advise the rest of them. And that's how I see it. And they are perfectly willing to accept the advice. We just don't have the resources and the capacity to approach all the streams you're addressing. I mean, I should be sitting on building a national pollution action plan right now. That's where I should be spending my time. But my day will go into all sorts of different urgent challenges competing for time and attention. So if that happens with you, please be very clear. You just have to prioritize. And we are happy to sit with you in a real task force meeting. My ministry is happy to sit with you so that we can actually take your projects up to a place where they have had a transformative effect on the ground. We have been doing several things, and I have not been saying all the right things. I know, Chima Saab, I wanted to talk about what is important to me. But what is important to you also matters. I hope that this December we are able to remember the climate vulnerable in their tents, in their fragility, in their extreme vulnerability. When we talk of nature, when we talk of our links with this earth, nature will not reset itself, ladies and gentlemen. It will not reset itself. That is the expectation at the back of the human inaction roadmap. Honestly, this is why people don't act. They just think it'll happen on its own. It will not. It will only get worse. And that we should be clear about. We should be clear about setting up a communication with people so they understand. I mean, and individuals, communities, provinces, federation, all must work in a cascade of climate consciousness. There isn't enough of that. And we need all to be vigilant as both as individuals and as actors in our own professional capacities. In this morning's walk, I saw somebody's chowkidar or driver hosing a car down. I tried to be patient. On my way back, I said, he's still hosing the car down, which was 20 minutes later. I said, listen, you have to stop this. Please don't mind my saying so. I know this is another friend's vehicle. There are other ways of cleaning this vehicle than spending 20 minutes of water on a hose pipe. Because Pakistan's frontline water emergency is water. Climate emergency, is water. Either it's deficit or it's overflow. It's flood management or it's desertification of our South Plains. By 2025, we are predicted to be water scarce. Much of it is climate change because we are entirely dependent on glacial melt, not rain, unlike our neighbors who are dependent on both. And glacial melt has the unique way of both destroying when glaciers melt and expending water into flood streams that are unusable as water resources. So our glaciers are melting at 5 times the rate they were before, 3 to 5 times because of global warming. If tomorrow, I was addressing a Twitter space to the UK this morning, early morning, 7 o'clock. They were up late, so I did it. And they said, what can we do? I said, you can get totally green tomorrow, totally green. And Pakistan can be totally renewable. No vehicles that will be non-electric, no fossil fuels, nothing. You will still be the hottest planet in the place on the planet at 53 degrees plus, like we were this year and last year and the year before that. Why? Because we are too small a contributor to the emissions that change the climate for us. That will all have an impact of how we live. So naturally, some Pakistanis are a little angry that we are paying a heavy price for those who emit, and that price is on our doorstep. It's like a dystopia we can't recover from. We all need your help now to recover and to make that recovery sustainable, to make that recovery inclusive, and for it to address our nature positive goals. Because without nature positivity, no amount of climate change will matter. It is a planet and species being that we need to basically take back. That goes, now I have one last ask of you, IUCN. I'm having trouble with a national action plan on plastics. I need help with that. Because it's going straight into our oceans, and by 2050, the world's oceans will be filled with more plastic than fish. I have a big coastline and I'd like to protect it. Thank you very much.